So, this is the tier list about expansions. It is this time of the expansion where we can actually judge 100% if it was a good or a bad expansion. We're going to judge on PvP, rated, unrated, which is World PvP, BGs, duels. We're going to judge about the availability of also the gear. Is it easy to farm gear? Is it PvP heavy, or do you have to get a PvE tier set, for example, or PvE items to compete? And by saying compete, I mean like literally doing raids and raids and raids to get the best in slot for your trinkets or for anything. Is there a competitive PvP scene? Is it thriving? Overall, did it bring any newness to the expansions? Now, again, it's an opinionated tier list. It is not fact. I will try to defend my tier list. So obviously, I'm going to give you some arguments. So please do not like skip ahead. Like again, then you would understand why I put certain pieces to S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, or D tier. Also, Wrath of the Lich King, TBC, Cataclysm, and Vanilla, so classic. I'm going to judge them all um, for it being classic. So 2019, TBC, whenever it came out, Wrath, and also Cataclysm Classic. So I'm not going to judge them by the heydays because again now we have another perspective and some things may change because of the nostalgia hitting and then like dimming. So we're going to talk about that as well. Now, we did ramble a lot. I'm going to explain now the tiers so you also understand why, what is S tier, A tier, and whatever. S tier means that it is really a great expansion and was innovative, but also was really cool to be alting as well. It was easy access. It would be a classic, I would say, that if it was replayed. It definitely is a good expansion in retrospective. Maybe on the time itself, it may not be like extremely good, but you reassess the situation. You would say, yeah, if you compare it to other expansions, it was actually very good. It just was like maybe a season or two that were not that good. I'm going to discuss that as well. A tier means that it is very good, but it has like a few defaults. Like it was maybe not perfect. It had like some issues. Maybe too long of a season. Maybe too hard to get gear or whatever. B tier would say that it is average. It has very good points, but also very weak points. C tier means that it has like overwhelming weak points, and you had like some nostalgia or some good things going on. And D tier means that it has no real PvP structure. It was not easy to get gear, or overall it was kind of a joke, or overall I still have a bitter taste in my mouth. Again, it is very opinionated. I might have enemies at the end of the video, but again, we're all here to discuss. So obviously, if you want to discuss about it, you can write a message. I'll read every single message, and I'll try to respond on them whenever I have time. So I'll always do that. So be sure to do that as well. All right, let's talk about classic. I'm going to try to go chronological, although sometimes I might skip it because I feel like it's easier to talk about a certain tier, for example. Vanilla, classic. I'm not talking about SOD because I think SOD itself, it's like not something that is very replayable because it's not going to come back. Like what you're seeing right now in SOD, you might see it in a different version in 2 years' time. So they were going to do another season of whatever, it's going to be very different. So I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about classic. And outside of the nostalgia factor, I actually like the PvP of classic. It had no rating, unfortunately, so it already falls down. It cannot be S tier. It had very difficult access to gear, so it's very hard to put them at A tier. It has fantastic synergies in classes, and classes felt like very different from each other. So it was really rock paper scissors kind of thing gameplay, and you had like obvious very good classes that are very good in duels and classes that are very bad, but they were compensating with obviously a lot of utility into groups. So if you would do wars on gulges, you would have a spot, I would say. Gear was very important, especially PvE gear and PvP gear. If you are like really a tryhard and you're able to do rank 14 or whatever, rank 13, you would obviously have a great time with a PvP gear on, but it was very, very hard to access, and it's still very hard to access, even though they nerfed it. Like the acquisitions, it is still a real commitment to get it, and kind of makes it charm as well. So I'm going to put it in B tier because I really like the combat, although it's very slow paced. Sometimes slow pace is also very good. Less is more, like I said multiple times. You had a lot of abilities, you have a lot of flavor. In PvE, you might maybe spam Frostbolt, for example, as a mage, but trust me, if you don't use the whole kit as a mage in PvP, you're kind of missing out. The same for warriors, the same for rogues, the same for any single class. It was very flavorful, for sure, and I still play Classic. I still play till this day, sometimes Classic on Classic era, and so it's very hard to come in, but again, I think like Classic era is still something that it can go fresh tomorrow and have a lot of value, and that is something that I could not say the same for, let's say, other expansions on this list. I'm very sorry for my broken voice, but I sang too much in the car, so obviously, and now I don't have a voice, and I'm also sick, so I guess it's my bad. But yeah, B tier. TBC. Now TBC Classic was interesting because I do feel like you still have uniqueness with the classes. I think PvP gear was a bit easier to attain, although you still wanted to PvE a lot to get a gear, so it's very hard to put it at S tier anymore because it's not possible for me. I think also not having conquest and arena points was very punishing, so you cannot really alt late into the season, or you cannot really take a break at the beginning of the season and then come back and hope you're going to do good, because you cannot really come back. You cannot really catch up arena points. You can catch up conquest, like for example in Cataclysm Classic, you can do that because they did add it. But if you miss like 3 weeks, it's like 3 weeks of arena points that you could have gathered, and it was actually like worth items. And basically you were kind of doomed, especially if you like missed like 5 or 6 weeks. Like it was already GG. You might just wait for next season, for example. I do feel like it's really restrictive in comps. The top tier is top tier, and I still think like the nostalgia part is still there, but World PvP is like a steep lower than like vanilla. Obviously, it had rated, so it really depends on what you value. In TBC Classic, I would have liked to have more World PvP, but the servers were already dead, so it was very difficult. I do feel like, again, since there is no like cross server grouping at that time, it's very hard to actually get like arena partners. Also, the LFG system is way worse than on retail, and retail it is already a worse or a bad system. So imagine in TBC Classic, and without cross server. So imagine if you're like on a server that has like no PvP crowd, it is also GG. So for me, with all that being said, it had really good positives and also very bad negatives. For me, it would be on the same tier as vanilla. Again, I cannot really say who is ahead or not because it really depends on perspective. Again, I value rated, but I feel like rated in TBC Classic, it really depends on your POV, if you had a lot of friends or if you didn't have a lot of friends, or if your server was very active or your server was not active. Also, the World PvP was not like non-existent. BGs were thriving because they did do cross-faction BGs at the end of TBC, if I'm not mistaken, or like at the middle of like TBC Classic. I'm not talking like back in the day, I'm talking right now. So obviously I do feel like they did better than before. I would say like without the quality of life changes that they did, it would be end up C tier. But at the end, I have a good feeling about TBC, but I still prefer vanilla in my eyes because of the world. So if you would say what is the better game, I would say vanilla was the better overall game. But what is the best PvP? I would say it's really equal. Wrath of the Lich King Classic. Now, that's a hot take. I actually didn't like Wrath of the Lich King Classic. I feel like the meta was even worse than I would say TBC, because it was very, very clear. Warrior, Elemental Shaman, Holy Paladin was the meta, and you had also like Disc Priest for a bit. Resto Shaman was MIA. You had Druids, also not very, very good. It was okay, but it was not very good because you didn't have a magic dispel, which really sucked. So the meta was already like very established, but also you didn't have conquest as well. So again, you cannot put it at S tier because gear was still not available to everyone, and you had no catch-up mechanic. You cannot put it A tier because also too much PvE gear. Like at one point, you really needed a lot of PvE gear. The PvP gear was good, but if you want to have the top, you had to PvE. There is no way you would not be like. You cannot be relevant without going into PvE. That's what I'm going to say. But the PvP was quite fun. Classes were more fleshed out. They did some quality of lives here and there, but you could group cross server at that point. If you had like friends from Firemaw and you were in Gehennas, for example, for some reason, and you're both alliance, you could invite your friend, but you had to had him on Battle.net, so there was no real possibility to get someone that is unknown from you from different servers. You had to join Discord groups. You had a lot of bots as well in Wrath of the Lich King Classic. It was horrible. I think TBC had that as well, but Wrath of the Lich King was really like submerged with like scripting bots, and trust me, it is not fun to play against. They were all playing rogues as well. It was horrible to play. But overall, it has also very big positives. But with that being said, big positives and big negatives, it does make for a B tier. And again, I cannot judge them like separate from each other because Wrath of the Lich King has the same problem as TBC, which is PvE gear was superior. You had no great LFG as well. It was very hard. And since this is a raided environment, the one that has more friends, more availability will get more gear because they would have more arena points than someone that doesn't have that. So it has the same kind of difficulty of gearing up like in Classic, I would say. Although you could, again, raid and do dungeons or do whatever to get gear, or at least to catch up with the gear. But if you want to catch up just purely with PvP, it is impossible because the gear was just not available to you. If you were like 6 weeks AFK and then you come back, yeah, you cannot really catch up. Even if you play like 24-hour for 7 days, you would not be able to catch up because there is like a limitation. Also, arena points were refreshed every single week, so you had to wait every Wednesday in EU to get your arena points to be able to spend. Again, the system was really flawed, and they should have done Conquest, and they didn't do that. They didn't pull the trigger, but in Cataclysm Classic they did. Now, Cataclysm Classic, I'm currently playing it. I still debate to make tier list or more like guides about it, but maybe on the second channel. But I don't have time because of my Scrum project, so I have like a lot of work to do. But Cataclysm Classic has, I would say, great PvP. The meta is way broader, although it's still very, very noticeable what is OP, what is not. But it is broader. I feel like a lot of more specs are available and can be played. I would say also they are more fleshed out. They are a bit of homogenization between the classes, which is, again, that's the start of retail, kind of, Cataclysm, although I would say the start of retail would have started with Mist of Pandaria and Wall of the Drainer, but that's another topic. Cataclysm Classic at least had Conquest, which, again, for example, I AFK'd for the first 2 or 3 weeks. It was like 8k? No, it was 12k Conquest that you had to grind, and you could actually come back. So I did come back on my Warlock, I did come back on my Resto Druid, and I'm fully geared now, or at least I'm fully geared for PvP. Right now on the Cataclysm Classic, like the first season of Cataclysm Classic, PvE is not that relevant for gearing, but it will become more relevant. So it's for me at the moment very hard to put it at S tier, although it does feel like a S tier like expansion for PvP, especially if you're playing like really good classes. It can feel very good. I think the issues with PvP, I would say, is you really need gear, you really need resilience, and resilience is something I like. Now that I play more Cataclysm Classic, it's something I despise. Some people may like resilience, I don't like it, simply because if you play BGs, one time your conflag, for example, as a destruction warlock, would crit for 25k, and the other time is going to create around 10k. And it only depends on resilience. Like if resilience is very high, your damage is really bad, or at least it doesn't feel good. Like it feels like you're doing less damage. Although I would say resilience versus resilience, it is normal damage, but you're so used to being able to crit insane amounts on like raid bosses, but also on players that has no resilience. That at one point you're telling yourself, but dude, at one time I'm feeling like a god, and then another time it feels like I'm like pillow fighting, and that's why I don't like resilience versus like what we have right now. I think versatility is not that great, but I will discuss it on a future video. But it does feel like, look, if you're going to a BG, your damage you're going to do is kind of the same as you would do in arenas, for example, even at higher rated, because gear doesn't matter as much on retail than on Cataclysm Classic, even though some people would say that, for example. It is not the case. Like, really, the difference between a honor geared, fully geared class on Dragonflight and a full conquest geared class on Dragonflight is really minimal. Like I think it's between 5 to 10% more damage or more stats. So if you're doing a 200k crit, it would be a 180k crit, for example, if you're like honor geared, which is again, it's not that big. While someone that is like honor geared in Cataclysm and then conquest geared on Cataclysm, the damage is really significant. And yeah, I think again, I do like Cataclysm Classic, so I'm going to put that at 8 here. I think it's probably the best classic expansion for sure. Like objectively, it could be even higher, but I'm going to leave it for the other expansions. I feel like it is way higher. But right now, Cataclysm Classic, you do not need too much PVE. You generally, what I do is I do only BH, which is Baron in Hold. A Baron in Hold? Yeah, I'm saying correctly, right? BH, to get some PvP gear. So you can get PvP gear through that raid. So it's PvP items, right? So yeah, I'm doing that. Or sometimes it drops a epic, which I'm not having a epic on that slot. I would like slot it, but I would replace it ASAP by PvP gear, which is again I think for PvP like game mode you want to be able to equip PvP gear. That's my opinion. If you have to equip PvE gear, then it means that it fails. I think the only thing that you want to equip PvE is probably the trinkets right now, and it's like not really a must. You can do that. It's a not that big a difference. It does make difference, but not that much. You do need professions though, so that's the only thing that you probably have to grind PvE wise. But yeah, I mean you cannot really have everything. That's why it's 8 here, because it is still relevant for that. Mist of Pandaria is going to be interesting to talk because now it's nostalgia talking. I don't really play Mist of Pandaria. I did play private service on it, but it was really wacky though. So the experience was not that good, but it's because the server was wacky. I don't think it's like Mist of Pandaria being wacky. But from what I've played, it was my favorite expansion back in the day. Now I don't know if it is still, but it was. But also because everything was really busted, and at one point you're telling yourself, is it good that everything is busted? I would say, arguably, if everything is busted, nothing is. Or if nothing is busted, then everything is. So kind of like it eliminates each other. PvP gear was also way better. I also feel like you didn't have to PvE as well. If I remember correctly, you didn't need to PvE. Maybe for a few things later down the line, maybe the legendary ring or cloak. I don't remember correctly anymore. If someone wants to help me out, but that's it. Like PvP wise, I think you even did have to do BGs for that, if I'm not mistaken. But whatever, like it was a big quest line, if I'm not mistaken. But overall, arenas were really good. They have to put like the conquest how it was on classic, like Cataclysm Classic, and they will do that because it's a huge success. Uh, when I'm playing Cataclysm Classic, I love it, but I'm really just in the waiting room for Mist of Pandaria. If that comes out, I'm going to play a lot. And I have a different opinion maybe, but I would have an opinion about it. Last season was probably the most remembered season. It was because everything was busted. Like I think Chaos Bolt like really was cracked out back in the day. I think like Hunter specs were also cracked down. I think that was also the last iteration where I really liked Enhancement Shaman, like really, really. But yeah, that's again another topic. It was also the expansion where you could actually lightning bolt while moving, not with a spell, but like baseline. You could lightning bolt while moving. You could incinerate while moving, for example, as a warlock. It had like a lot of like flavorful things. So I'm going to put that at S tier because it like hits every single criteria. And right now I cannot really imagine a negative about Mists of Pandaria. So I'm going to put that at S tier, maybe top one, top two, or top three expansion of all time. Walls of Draenor, which is an expansion I actually liked for PvP. I liked the Epic BG Ashran, which is not Epic BG back in the day. It was actually like an event, kinda. You had to join. It was limited with your server, and if you had space, you would then enter. That was very fun, although it very like it got stale at one point because they kind of abandoned the system very early in the expansion, which is very bad. But it was actually good. I think the patches were also very long, unfortunately. Like I think that's one of the problems that they actually suffer. PvP gearing was also great, and you didn't have to PvE, from my understanding and from what I remember. I even made like a montage video in Walls of Draenor about my Retribution Paladin. It was actually very fun. That was the start of pruning as well, but I did feel like pruning of Walls of Draenor was not that bad. It was actually okay, and I feel like these days people are asking to get like rid of the button bloat. So we're going back to the Walls of Draenor things, and then we are going to have like two expansions later, probably a demand of more buttons. So that's a endless cycle of players actually wanting something that they don't want and then want something that they actually wanted once it's gone. So obviously it's always going to be something like that. But overall, if I have to judge the whole expansion, I think it went for a bit too. It went for too long. That's the issue. If it was like short and sweet, like for example, I think Mists of Pandaria was quite short, if I remember correctly. But Walls of Draenor was very long, and that was one of the problems for Walls of Draenor. So I think if it was actually shorter, it would have been remembered a bit better. And also, if they actually like went for better iterations for PvE, I think people would remember also the PvP side a bit more. So for me, with that being said, I cannot judge right now, but if they have to go for the conquest route that we had, what we have right now, I'm going to judge it at A tier because of the negative, which is a little one or a big one, depending on how you see it. It was actually a bit too long. A bit too long. I think PvP, the gameplay was good. It was like you had broken season, by the way. Like you had like combat rogues actually like hitting killing spree and like killing you, murdering you while doing a killing spree. Like it, I remember those days, but I think every single expansion has like a busted thing, so it's very hard to judge it on it. And I think it depends. If the patch that comes out is actually a decent patch, it has a big meta, it could be good. But if it's like limited like Wrath of the Lich King, then I would say that it would be probably dropping back down to B tier. But I'm going to put that at A tier. And again, I don't think there's going to be a classic for Walls of Draenor. If they do that, that's really ballsy, but I don't think they're going to do that. All right, we are at the midpoint, kinda. Let's talk about Legion. Now, this time is going to be the moment that people are going to hate me. I'm going to put that at D tier. Yes, I actually didn't like Legion templates. So for the people that didn't play Legion, you had templates in PvP. So it means that your gear was irrelevant. You could go in with no gear. Literally, it would not matter because you had scaling. It was also the time where everything was very bizarre in PvP. You had like level 10s one-shotting level 100s. I think it was level 100 back in the day, yeah? Yes, it was. I think. Yeah, it was level 100. You had level 100? 110. And then 120 was BFA, and then it became level 60 back, level 50. level 60 in Shadowlands, level 70 in Dragonflight, level 80 in War Within. Yeah, so it was level 110, and like you had wacky scaling, man. It was actually ridiculous. Templates were also ridiculous. You had like a lot of templates were taken for PvE, which were not good in PvP. You had also no say into like actual design of your spec, because again, if you cannot choose your main stats, like your secondary stats, it really sucks, because then it becomes no MMO anymore. You cannot really choose what builds you're going for. Again, like I'm someone that loves to experiment things. I love to be able to say, look, today I'm going to play full haste warrior, or tomorrow I'm going to play full mastery warrior. If I want to try in 2 weeks, 3 weeks full crit warrior, let me try it. I don't care if I'm going to suck. Let me try it at least. Or like I have a crazy combination. And you already saw like I did like maybe 7 guides about like different playstyles in season 1 on Dragonflight for warriors. So that's the kind of thing I like. I don't like templates. I didn't like templates. I hope it never comes back, because if it comes back, it is the day that I'm going to step away from WoW until it goes away, because it's really not what I like about WoW. So there is that. There was also no vendors, so automatically it always goes down for that. Uh, you had to do PVE as well for some things, especially like you had the artifact powers, right? So you had to grind that. There was no way you can not like you can forget about it. You had to do artifact powers. There were also honor levels, so you had to grind your honor level to get specific things for your class. There were multiple things that were actually very, very odd. It was not odd friendly at all, because you had still to do artifact things. And people remember the gearing not mattering, which is okay. I understand that you would like that, but there was no template. So there was no way for you to choose what stats you were going for. So what's the point? It's not like Guild Wars 2 where you can put the amulet and with the stats what you want. That's not the case. The case is you have your stats. The difference is like 5% or whatever with gear, without gear. I think it like maybe had no difference even. But yeah, I despise it. Get out of my way with Legion. I don't like it. I never liked it actually. And maybe I'm a bit harsh with the D tier, but I actually didn't like Legion. I liked Legion at the start because of the lore, because of also the movie coming out. I think Walls of Draenor. I think the movie came out between those two expansions. It was also the expansion I came back to WoW, because Walls of Draenor made me quit because it was too long. I did a lot of League of Legends. Came back for Legion. Played a lot of Season 1. It was very harsh because you had to do a lot of things and you had to keep up. And I was like someone that plays a lot of like classes back in the day as well. Step away from it, and I came back for BFA and the same. So I'm going to talk about BFA. Also, no vendors, please. Then you had BFA, and BFA actually managed to not have vendors, so it drops down. It had to do a lot of PVE, a lot of PVE. I mean Mythic plus PVE even, so it drops down. It had wonky seasons and wonky classes and specs, and the balancing was really terrible in my opinion, until maybe the last season where you had corruption and you had the vendor. It was still like terrible, but still there. And I think also no vendors, which again, like I said, that was that could drop like 2 things. You see, a B tier, you had vendors even like RAF and TBC, but it was actually very hard to get, and PvE gear was like still number 1. I would say BFA is on the same tier as Legion. I really didn't like it. I despise it. It made people, like so many people, quit at the end. Shadowlands made people come back, but then also made people quit at the same time. BFA was a low point, man. I liked the lore though, but like, how was it called? Warfronts? I thought Warfronts were really a PvP event, but they actually made it a PvE event. Alliance versus Horde, the ideal concept, but they actually decided to make it a PvE event. And then you had like PvP islands. They had so many cool things, man. The world PvP was actually very good for BFA, so that might even put it in C tier, to be honest. But You had also a fourth PvP talent. You had like some cool things like Azeroth, but you still had to grind it though. Like my heart says that it's better than Legion, but my mind is saying like, look, it's actually the same shit. So I'm going to put that at D tier. I might be too harsh. Maybe it's like this, but that you may decide. That's probably it for the C tier and D tier. Uh, Spoiler alert: Shadowlands and Dragonflight are nowhere near of those tiers. So again, you might be mad, but that's like your inner you, actually talking badly about those expansions. But actually, those expansions were probably one of the better expansions that we had from us like a long time. Shadowlands, a bit of history. They brought back PvP gear and PvP gear that you could buy because you had PvP gear in BFA, I think also in Legion, but it was like drops. You had to drop it. You had to be lucky. Or you had to do world PvP quests, and you got it, but it was also random, and the pieces were like again, it was really bad. But Shadowlands actually brought the vendors back, so automatically for me it's already a A or B tier automatically. PvP gear was also the number one material that you wanted, the gear that you wanted. So regardless, it is also no B tier, it is A tier because it's the same as those two. You had to do still PvE because you needed the legendaries and you needed these soul ashes or whatever. You had to do Torghasts. You had a lot of maintenance. That's the problem. I think in Shadowlands, a lot of people despise the maintenance that you had, the covenants that you cannot switch at season one like how you wanted. You had to wait 2 weeks or whatever. You had to do a quest to change it. So the experiment was not that good. You had to farm conduits, which ideally you would have it in Raids or in Mythic Plus. I think the legendaries was a cool system, but you had to do way too much PVE to get it, like to get it at par. I also say like they had too long seasons. I think season one was too long. The inflation was very good. A lot of people were glad at the time. RBGs were popping, but it was because PvP gear actually was a good alternative to PvE gear. So PvEers would actually do go PvP to get the best items possible in Duelist, which was the max eye level because you had to upgrade it, and they had to do RBGs and whatnot to get honor, which is the currency that you would have to upgrade your gear. It was actually very hard to get honor. Like you had to spam things, you had to spam games, and as well you had to then do arenas or RBGs to get like a specific rating. So it was actually a good season one, but it was like filled with a lot of like have to dos, which nobody really likes. You want to do things because you want to do it, not because you have to do it. Then it becomes like a chore. So for me, Shadowlands, with all that being said, I like the first two seasons. Season 3 was also okay. Season 4 was bad. Season 3 was also bad, to be honest, but it was better than Season 4. Season 4, I think Season 4s are like overall just bad, except for like, let's say, Miss of Pandaria, which is really bad. Luckily, in War Within, I think there will be only 3 seasons because then the new expansion will come out because it's like a 1.5 year difference. It would be 6 months, 6 months, 6 months for every season, every raid tier, I would say. So that would be a bit faster as a cannons, which in Dragonflight is already a bit too long in my opinion. But I'm going to put that at A tier, and that's not nostalgia talking because it was very, very like it was like 2 years ago, or like 3 years ago. I actually like Shadowlands. I like that a lot of classes were relevant. The balancing was actually a bit too slow, but again, Cataclysm Classic has no balance right now, so I cannot judge it about balancing like every single week because I cannot do that for the other expansions as well. So especially the classic ones because they were like frozen in time. But for me, Shadowlands, it kind of deserves the A tier. Although people would hate it and love to hate it, they brought vendors back. They brought cool things back. They brought legendaries, which IMO I liked it except the grind. But at one point, like in season 2 or season 3, they actually alleviated a lot of the grind, so it was also a lot easier to do so. It was actually expensive. You had to like craft your legendaries, which were very expensive gold wise, which they like made it very different on Dragonflight. Like the crafting was it's really cheap on Dragonflight, so that's a good thing. But yeah, I think Shadowlands deserves an A tier, and maybe like this, then maybe Cataclysm in front, and the Walls of Draenor as a good fifth. Because Dragonflight, spoiler alert, is S tier. Why S tier? Because it actually is everything Shadowlands was, but way better. I would say it's also way better than Cataclysm Classic. Again, no resilience. Mr. Pandaria still had resilience, if I'm not mistaken, or PvP power, something like that. Um, but in Dragonflight, no resilience. So what you're hitting is going to be what you're going to hit in any regards, PGs or arenas. It might have like a bit of differences between the classes and between the modifiers, but that's it. PvP gear is incredibly easy to get. They also introduced in Shadowlands the beta of Solo Shuffle was a brawl. They actually implemented rated in Dragonflight. And even if you hate Solo Shuffle right now, even if you hate the Q times, even if you hate the healer MMR, nobody can deny Season 1 Dragonflight was actually legit. It was actually legit good. I got like legend on my two like main specs, which were BM Hunter and Destruction Warlock. I got like very near with my warrior as well. I got very near with my enhancement shaman as well. It was actually very fun. It was very alt friendly. Crafting is incredibly easy, just makes it way faster to gear as well. Vaults were a bit annoying, but they actually removed it in War Within anyways, so there is that. RBG scene was kind of dead. I'm not gonna lie, that maybe is a bad thing. That's why it's like maybe not top one. The open world PvP was not that bad actually. I just think they could do way more with it. So it's always the same things. Like they have like a golden mine underneath their feet. They start to dig and they stopped midway until you had like a sliver of dirt above the gold, and they forgot to just pick up their pickaxe and try to dig it again. That's it. But Dragonflight had good balancing. The cadence was very good until season 3, where they decided to get their balancing team actually like some free paid off vacations because there was AWC for some reason, and the Mythic Plus Grand Tour. I don't know how it's called anymore. So they decided, oh, PvP and PvE had to compete, so we don't need to balance the game because then it would be too hard for the competitors to actually be competitive. But who cares about the 0.0001% of the player base? Please care about the 99% of the player base because then you would make it thrive. So season 3 was a bust. Season 4 was a bust. They introduced a few fun things here and there, but please, I mean, you gotta pick up your game. You gotta don't forget about your. I also communication was really bad, man. Like Dragonflight, they actually said at one point, "I'm not going to communicate because our executive PvP designer is gone. Like Holinka was gone in Dragonflight as well. So they kind of dropped the ball. But if you're going to look back at Dragonflight, I swear, in 5 years' time, you're going to say Dragonflight was actually a legit expansion, maybe top one expansion. I think in a few years, you're going to say, but Dragonflight was actually legit, man. That was like the beginning of like the best things going on. They introduced solo QRBGs in Blitz, in the brawl. So luckily in War Within it will come out. I wish it was actually coming out in season 3 or season 4. They didn't do that. They had to do it, but they didn't pull the trigger. But in War Within they're going to do that. So it's going to be incredibly fun. I think the season 1 War Within will overtake everything. That's my prediction. Season 1 War Within will be the best PvP experience. Any expansions. Mark my words. You can even like quote me. You can make me ridicule on Reddit, on forums, on Twitter. I don't care. I swear, War Within will be the best expansion that we ever had for PvP. I think right now it only is a question of balancing, but I will argue that balancing is something very subjective. For something that is OP, someone might not think it is OP. For something that you might think it's a good PvP season, someone that has a bad class, for example, Enhanced Shaman or Frost Decay in Dragonflight, might think it is the worst season ever. It is subjective. It depends on the eyes of the beholder. So again, I do feel like Dragonflight is really a legit expansion, even top 2. In my eyes, if Mob Classic comes out tomorrow and it is not like the extreme goodness that it was back in the day, I would even say it is top 1. But I think the time where it comes out, most of Mists of Pandaria Classic, will also be the time where War Within would be season 2 or season 3. So maybe at that time, depending on how the hype is for War Within, I might even forget about Mists of Pandaria. But I will be playing because of nostalgia. But if War Within is really that good, because again, solo queue RPGs, guys, solo queue RPGs, I already feel like this is going to happen. This is going to happen. War Within tier. Yes, yes, yes. That this will be remembered as War Within tier because solo queue RPGs, solo queue RPGs. Anyways, if anyone disagrees with me, if anyone agrees with me, please comment below. Hopefully you did watch the whole video so I don't have to repeat myself in the comments. Because if you say to me, why is it S tier? I will just say, why aren't you watching the video? So sorry, but I'm going to say that because again, the point of those long videos are actually to articulate my thoughts and my thinking process behind those tiers. I understand that some people don't want to watch 40-minute videos, but then don't ask like questions like this. But mostly, I think most of my subscribers, if not 99% of my subscribers, actually watch the whole videos. I think it's like probably people that don't know me or don't know how my style is for tier list that think I'm like literally gaining time, which I'm not doing that. I'm actually like liking to explain my thought process so you actually understand my POV. You may not agree with it, but at least you would know what I'm thinking, so you understand the process. You might say agree to disagree. I understand you, but I'm not agreeing with you. Kind of feel. But again, thank you for watching this video. Really appreciate you. Again, my voice is gone. Hopefully, it will be better tomorrow. But I'll try to make a video tomorrow, which might be about either tanks in PvP, a good subject to talk for War Within, or a versatility should it be gone and replaced with a passive. I'm going to talk about that as well. But again, thank you for watching. Have a good day. Bye.